you've got a really good group of coaches in the state. Obviously I'm partial to Robbie McClellan at NJIT because I coached him at Arizona State. And, we may talk about this in a little bit, but what they did in Fayetteville was remarkable. I mean, they were the bells of the ball, right? I mean, the city of Fayetteville, wrapped their arms around those kids.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. We've got TGIM. We've got Valentine's Day. We've got opening week of D1 college baseball. And so who better to bring on than the person who loves college baseball more than anybody in the world that we know. It's ESPN's premier college baseball analyst, D1baseball.com's Mike Rooney. Mike, thanks for coming on. And busy, fun time of year, right?
That's right. Oh, yeah. I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. My brain is mush. We're in the midst of preview season. We're just writing and getting after it. It's super fun. But yeah, this is awesome. It's a blur, but an awesome time of year. So excited.
That's right. Just to remind you, we are in New Jersey. We are in the state right next to where you grew up, that little tiny state.
That's right. Down
the shore, Sea Isle City remembrances. That's so I don't know if that's going to help you or not, but you're right. I mean, previews all over the country. It's a crazy fun time. No lockouts here. We're going to got to be ready to go on Friday. When do you start doing the broadcast grind?
Yeah, so I will have just, because I live in Arizona, there's a lot of northern teams that come here to start those first 3 weeks.
Yep.
So I get to do some local games, like I've got Arizona State here and Grand Canyon here and University of Arizona here. And so I get to do some local games for, local cable, for Flow Sports, that type of stuff. So that's really fun. And then the ESPN stuff usually picks up right when basketball is ending. That's when usually their channels start to free up. So still waiting to hear. Usually you kind of hear a month out, but yeah, usually like early April to me is when it really becomes go time.
And maybe there'll be more with no majors, at least as in the foreseeable future.
Crazy, right?
They'll figure it out, but who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, I don't know. It's like every time I read something about the lockout, I think I get more confused. I don't know what to make of it all.
I don't even know I don't even know if they know how many billions they're arguing over at this point.
That's a good point.
Crazy. It's a crazy world, but let's start out a little closer to home. It was a historic an historic season in New Jersey last year in some ways, college baseball wise. 2 MAC teams making the NCAA tournament. One of them being local here in New Jersey, as Rider wins the conference. They got their championship rings the end of January. They're pretty cool.
Nice.
NJIT winning the America East, getting the first New Jersey win in the NCAAs in 10 years. You had a great Monmouth team. You've got Rutgers on the rise. You've got Seton Hall kind of in a tougher position in the Big East with UConn coming in. You've got Princeton in the Ivies. You got St. Peter's trying to find its way in the MAC. And you've got FDU in the Northeast Conference, and I think I hit everybody on my first try, which is a
well
good
done.
thing. Yeah, so 2021 was a great year. Can we follow that up in 2022 is kind of the question.
Yeah, I would say when you were speaking there, Olsh, 2 things came to mind for me. One is like I just love the trend of the programs in New Jersey right now. Most, and I think that starts with leadership. I think you've got a really good group of coaches in the state. Obviously I'm partial to Robbie McClellan at NJIT because I coached him at Arizona State. And, we may talk about this in a little bit, but what they did in Fayetteville was remarkable. I mean, they were the bells of the ball, right? I mean, the city of Fayetteville, wrapped their arms around those kids. And so there's that, I think Steve Owens, what he's doing at Rutgers is, I mean, this dude has won everywhere. And you can already, you can see it percolating at Rutgers. I love they were really impressive. Hey, they swept Nebraska on the road last year, and Nebraska nearly goes to a super regional. I mean, they took
Mhm.
Arkansas to Game 7. So, yeah, I love the trend. One more comment I'll make, Olsh, is, we have a transfer portal now in college sports. And in college baseball, it takes us back to where we were 20 years ago, where kids could transfer and not sit out. And, I know the quote unquote air quotes smaller schools, you get a little panicky about that, because does that mean my best players get a phone call from the SEC and then they're gone? That is possible, right? That I'm not saying that's not a possibility, but I'll tell you what also happens. The portal works both ways. And I see this at Rutgers, where you get Jersey kids that want to go south and take a shot at it. And then, hey, only 9 guys can play. And at the end of the day, they want to be a drafted player. And so they got to get on the field, and they come home, and Rutgers killed it in the transfer market. So I think the transfer portal, it'll hurt New Jersey schools at times, but I think net it will be an overwhelming positive.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Certainly that, and some of the recruiting classes they've managed to fill out that, I can see over the next couple of years. I mean, it's that, arrow pointing up for them, certainly. And I think those conferences like the Big Ten, great conference, a lot of really strong teams. It certainly wasn't like that when you were or I was. It was the Ohio State and Minnesota conference back in our days.
Yeah.
Um, you know, there's no. I mean, Michigan made the finals a couple years ago, but there's really usually not a dominating college World Series level team. So you get a couple of good classes in, and you can join that, that top echelon, that, that this, what we mentioned, but also Nebraska, also Maryland, Iowa, Indiana. I mean, Indiana made the World Series about 2013.
2013, yeah.
You got some pretty darn good teams in there, and even if they're not top 10, you can get to that top 25 level pretty, with a couple of good pushes.
Yeah, I would say the challenge in the Big Ten is that, man, it's hard to separate yourself in that league. I mean, everybody's at least decent,
Right.
and so climbing the standings is difficult. I would group Rutgers and Iowa in they're like that tier 2, right? Like they're just right on the fringe of that top group. And the good news for Rutgers is, the Big Ten, because you mentioned it, also, like 2013, Indiana goes to Omaha. And then 2015, Illinois is hosting a super regional. We forget, in 2015, it was Illinois hosting Vanderbilt in the super regional that had Dansby Swanson and, Carson Fulmer and all those dudes on that team. Vandy was the visiting team. And then, you look at Michigan, to your point, I mean, it's so easy to slip your mind where they played for the national stinking title a couple years ago. I mean, they were in Game 3 of the College World Series finals, University of Michigan. And then, you look at what Nebraska did last year, where they pressed the number 1 team in the country to Game 7 of a regional. So I think if you're Rutgers centric, if they could just continue to progress up into that tier 1, hey, the Big Ten is getting 3, 4, and 5 teams in every year. You start to get your program in that mode. And I think when you get to a couple regionals in a row, that's when your kids start getting comfortable, and you can really pop one.
Definitely. Now, the MAC, probably asking too much to be a 2-bid conference again. But can anybody make that jump and be the next Fairfield is probably a fair question, right? I mean, because you're talking about a team that won 2 games in regionals and battled like crazy the 2 games they didn't win, and they didn't even win the conference title.
Yeah, it's crazy. I would say it's funny, Olsh. I did the MAC preview last year. There's one thing I'm proud of for D1 baseball. One thing I'm proud of, one thing I'm not. So I was thinking to myself, okay, the MAC, we got another MAC, Metro Atlantic. We need a cool hashtag. Like, we need something. And so the hashtag I created, which is not caught on at all, I'm the only one that likes it. But I said hashtag the second A is for awesome. The second A in the MAC. And so that was something I was proud of. What I was not proud of was picking Fairfield to finish 4th in the conference, and they go 33-1, and they didn't lose a game. Oh, Fairfield didn't lose a game till May.
You didn't have them starting 28-0? You didn't have that?
I did not have that. So But, you know, it's interesting, you know, like, you know, speaking of Jersey, Monmouth had a really good season. You know, I was really excited for Ryder and Barry Davis, where, you know, Barry Davis has been a guy that's been very popular at conventions and clinics. He's done a lot of research on the best coaches in college sports, and Skip Bertman and John Wooden. And, you know, we forget it's Dr. Barry Davis, the head coach of
Yeah,
Ryder, right? This guy's a
only one in
PhD.
D1 that I know of.
Yeah, me too. So yeah, it was cool to see Ryder pop their way through that tournament. They got sent to that Ruston regional, which was really, really difficult. That's where NC State was. But yeah, you know, hey, is two teams repeatable? I don't know. Like, you know, I probably not, but it was really a cool year to spotlight that this league's got good players. You know, this league is, this is good baseball. And I'm just really curious to see where, you know, the Monmouths and the Riders of the world, is there real separation between them and Fairfield, or was that a blip? That's what I'm really curious about.
No, I think those, you're talking about three really good teams, and you throw in like a Marist in there that
Mm-hmm.
was in COVID hell last year as far as their scheduling. You've got a making of another really fun conference tournament this year, and it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, no question. We forget, Quinnipiac, you know,
Was
went
it,
down to
they
East
your was that
Carolina a
your
couple
pick?
years ago and won game one of the regional. So
Right,
yeah,
they were the kind of it pick last year
yep,
because of what you said,
yep.
winning. You know, when you go down to ECU and you win a conference tournament game, and then, you know, again, it was such a crazy year that you know, you can't forget about them. That's a good
Mm-hmm.
program. Another good program, another good conference, another conference that keeps getting better is the Big East. You know, with UConn, you know, really back in play now, and finding its place. And sadly, you know, no Reggie Crawford on the mound,
It
uh,
stinks.
but still, you know, a conference that's better than ever baseball wise. Where does Seton Hall fit in there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny just looking up Seton Hall. It's so, I mean, we're going on 50. I think we're at 51 years of Shepard's coaching Seton Hall. I mean, how cool is that? Like in any sport, in college sports, you know, Mike was there 31 years, and I think this is Rob's 20th year, if I'm not mistaken. And so, yeah, I think I'm of two minds there, Olsh. One is that, you know, if you look at the last 10 years of Rob's tenure, Seton Hall has been remarkably consistent. And when I think of Seton Hall, I just think of, they play a really solid winning brand of baseball, almost like the Tampa Bay Rays, where they're not going to have the marquee, you know, billboard, you know, grabbing guy necessarily, but they're just sound in all areas. I do think more pitching and defense when I think Seton Hall. But once the Big East became a more normal size conference, I mean, Seton Hall has been in the top half of that league every single year. I think the problem for Seton Hall is what you just mentioned. This league is really elevating itself. I mean, UConn is you know, they're one of the best programs that just hasn't quite popped their way through to Omaha. I mean, I think they've been to regionals 7 in the last 11 years, something in that range. I mean, UConn is really good. They're really talented. They're well coached. So that's, you know, that's problematic. You know, Xavier's really good. Creighton's an outstanding program. I mean, you look at St. John's, as good as St. John's is, they're kind of sliding to the back half of the league right now. And I don't know it's necessarily anything they're doing wrong. It's just that some of these other leagues, or some of these other teams, keep elevating themselves. So I think ultimately that's the challenge for Seton Hall. You're in a one bid league that has really good baseball.
Yeah, and another that returns, thankfully, after 2 years of COVID hell, is the Ivy League, right?
Yeah.
So we've got Princeton and another longtime coach and Scott Bradley, and, you know, there's not a lot of guys who have more of an interesting perspective on the game than somebody who caught Randy Johnson's first no-hitter back in the day.
Right.
You know, what do we see from the Tigers? And from a bigger perspective, we talked briefly about the transfer portal. You know, there's a situation with the Ivy League where you lost two, you know, you get 2 extra years of eligibility because of COVID, but the Ivy League said, not with us. You know, you're
Right.
done after your 4 years. So it's like there's a separate transfer railroad, transfer portal market for really good Ivy League guys going to play at other schools now.
Yeah, my hope for the Ivy League, I mean, I don't know how any of us could make a prediction on what's going to happen this year in the Ivy League, given that they haven't played since 2019.
Coaches
But
can't either. That's right.
no, but I would say this, Ulsh, here's my hope for the Ivy League is pre-pandemic, I kind of was into what was going on in the Ivy League. These kids, you know, it was good baseball. You know, these aren't just brainiac kids. They're really bright kids who have baseball talent. I mean, think about Kyle Hendricks, you know, of the Cubs, and like they're really good players. The Ivy League has produced big leaguers over and over again. But I like the way those kids could go have an Ivy League career, get that world-class education, and then they were very attractive grad transfer recruits at really, you know, like schools like Wake Forest. Duke has taken on a lot of Ivy League kids. Right now, I worry that a lot of the Ivy League players we're having to make a decision like, if I want to play college baseball, I got to get out of here. And so you kind of had a scattering. So that's what I really want to see from, you know, I think the Ivy League's in the no judgment zone this spring from a baseball perspective. I just want to see it get back to that, what I thought was a cool system where these kids could go play their 4 years of Ivy League baseball. And then, you know, most of those kids are going to get a graduate degree anyway, because that's how they're wired. And it's a really cool way for them to finish up their college baseball career.
Yeah. I know you know, Penn is bringing in a couple of really tough classes, kind of mining that South Jersey area a little bit, and New Jersey. You know, over the next couple of years, you know, Columbia's had a good stretch, and Dartmouth and Yale when you look historically. So, you know, let's hope that they get back as soon as possible to that. Now, the other end of that historic side of it, you know, last year being the first time on the national stage, is NJIT and the America East. Now their conference took a little bit of hit. If you follow the conference roulette recently, it won't affect this year, but you know, with Stony Brook leaving to along with Monmouth to join the CAA, in a move that, you know, those moves are never baseball related, you know.
Never, no.
So I don't, you know, but to let's talk about NJIT a little bit. Some grit ball, some Brick City atmosphere up in Newark. Your longtime, you know, back in the day, your old recruit Robbie McClellan. They're doing some pretty cool things up there.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, it's disappointing because the realignment, because you know, Robbie and NJIT were starting to develop a little rivalry with Stony Brook. I mean, that was really chippy at the end of last year. You know, we cut.
It's in a little rivalry at the end.
Yeah, that's right. Right. So, you know, I don't know, maybe it's disappointing that's going to go away. Maybe it's a healthy thing. Who knows? But, you know, I think it speaks to, you know, Stony Brook has carried the water in that league forever. And it was, you know, it's neat to have other, you know, the rising tide lifts all boats. And, you know, I know Ulsh, you and I have talked about it, but I think what NJIT did in Fayetteville, in that Fayetteville regional, that's not just good for their program, although it's good for the league, right? I mean, you could argue, or I think I could make a sound argument that NJIT shows up in Fayetteville, they play the host Arkansas, and they just start trading punches with them. And that Arkansas got on their heels and never quite got themselves settled. I mean, Arkansas's run through now Arkansas was a beautiful team. I mean, what a great team. That's an all-time team for me that didn't make it to Omaha. But you know, they had to bring their closer Kevin Copson in the 4th inning against NJIT. I mean, if you had made a wager on that in Vegas, you'd be a bazillionaire right now. Like, there was no one everyone's saying, I don't even think Kevin Copson's in the stadium today. There's no way in heck he's pitching against NJIT.
Yeah, you talk about playing with an attitude that game. First batter home run, you know, it's 1-0. They got the lead literally right from the, 3 pitches in. I mean, that's a mentality though. I mean, you've coached at that level, right? How hard is it to instill that mentality into your guys when they are the underdogs, and embrace that role? And, you know, how impressive is it that he did, but then also, you know, the leaders on the team, the Paul Franzonis, the guys like that.
Yeah, I think it's you know, there's so many cliches that run through my head when you say that, right? Like, hey, so many times programs take on the personality of their head coach, and that's who Robbie McClellan was, right? He pitched in the Pac-10 at 6 foot, 160 pounds with what he thought was the best breaking ball on the planet Earth. So it's
Right.
like he had that mentality that, hey, like you guys are taller and you throw harder, but you don't have my hammer. And so, we played Stanford one year and they were probably ranked 1 or 2, and Robbie goes up there and just shoves it on him for 7 innings. And, he's just this JUCO guy from Southwest Kansas. And so I think, first of all, I see NJIT playing with that mentality, but also like Robbie's attracted to those types of players. I mean, Robbie's teammate was Dustin Pedroia, and so I sensed a lot of that in the Highlanders, that like they're not going to be the pretty team getting off the plane. They're going to be the team that gets after you.
Yeah. And obviously we want to make sure, FDU in the Northeast Conference, St. Pete's, obviously their struggles have been documented through the 2010s. When you are a team that's really trying to build in a one bid conference like they are, and even St. Pete's trying to build from less than nothing. I mean, when you lose that many games in a row, like I said, just a few years back, 78 in a row, and to start to take the steps towards respectability that they've had. I mean, they beat Marist last year. They beat Monmouth last year. It's single game successes now, but at least there's a starting point. What are the biggest challenges for programs like that when they're trying to rise in a smaller conference?
Yeah, I think it's really hard on the coaches, right? And like I would say, so much respect for those players and coaches. Hey, even losing in college baseball is a lot of work. It's not like, hey, the teams that win do weightlifting and they practice, and the teams that lose do the same things. They just don't get the results on game day. And so, I think I have so much respect for those players and coaches that, they put in the work, but they really don't get the rewards. I think at the end of the day, also, it really, a lot of times those coaches are having to recruit and try to coach up their team as best they can. But where they're really hurting is resources. It reminds me of being a high school coach in suburban Philly, where, hey, are there any teachers at this school that could be a baseball coach? Are there any people that have a job where they get off at 2 every day that I could help teach? I could teach that person to teach my players. So I think that's the biggest challenge for those programs, is they're just so resource deficient. And your time is finite. So you're trying to figure out, do I go fundraise? Do I coach? Do I recruit? It's difficult.
Yeah, and starting to see some signs there. Rob DeToma with his a great background at Fordham as an assistant, now at FDU, and they're starting to make some inroads there. And Lou Prietti over at St. Peter's is finally getting some of the help that he needs away from the field to have a shot. Because you want to see all the programs in New Jersey doing their best, and
yeah. Love Lou Olsch. Like, that's the one thing about Lou, is his attitude. We interact with him at D1 baseball on occasion, and like, just, he's so positive. He's so like, I just love, all of us in our lives need some of his attitude, where regardless of the storms and the results, the guy just stays positive and keeps grinding. God bless him.
I will say, if anybody can bring him back to that level, even to respectable level, and making the MAC tournament, it's Lou. And probably because he's Canadian, that he's got that. That's not an American attitude that he has. He's bringing it. And if anybody isn't bothered by that North Jersey cold in March, it's going to be Lou too. So it's not
great points.
Warm
well
for
said.
Him. Let's skip over to some of the New Jersey talent, because the players, we've got some really, some Jersey guys on your D1 baseball.com All-American teams. But probably if there was a fourth team, we'll start with there, because Trey Dombrowski from Monmouth just missed your cut, but was the Cape pitcher of the year, last summer. He's a kid who's got certainly all the potential of the world, and kind of heads a pitching staff at Monmouth that was, one of the best in the country.
Yeah, no question. I mean, yeah, you look at I would encourage anyone listening, go pull up Monmouth's team stats from last year. I mean, like 85 walks in almost 40 games. I mean, they don't
Yeah,
walk anybody.
no,
Just really, really, skilled pitching. And yeah, I remember Trey Dombrowski writing up Monmouth last year, and you're like, okay, man, that's interesting. 6'5", left-hander, not I think he's like, they list him at 215. Like that's a great get for a school like Monmouth, where, many times a big school will take a run at a kid with that profile. And then if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So, and hey, he delivered, like the performance was there. I think he's a guy that you bet on. I could see where the velocity is just going to keep picking up. Yeah, he's just, going to the Cape. That helps the confidence level. So yeah, I think Monmouth's got a real gem right there. And who knows? I mean, think about it. The kid from Fordham last year, Matt Mikulski, I mean, he ends up being the 50th pick overall. And so that's the one thing about being at a school like Monmouth is, Dombrowski's going to get a lot of eyeballs. There's going to be a lot of attention for him, and that probably serves him well.
absolutely. But looking at your All-American teams, right at the top, first team All-American, maybe the most valuable closer, maybe it'll be the Kevin Kopps of this year, is Nick Maldonado, Seton Hall prep grad. Interesting enough, his brother, Chris, is a senior at Seton Hall prep. He's headed to Clemson next year, one of the top players in the country. There's a chance that maybe the 2022 draft, it becomes a double Maldonado draft.
How about that? Yeah, I would say Nick Maldonado was interesting for us on the All-American teams because, first of all, he's really good, right? He's every time you see him, the one thing that stands out to me about Nick Maldonado is his consistency. Every time you see him, you get the same dude. You get 91 to 93 with a really, like just a wipeout out pitch slider. And he wasn't one of the famous guys on that pitching staff coming into 2021. He was a name that you knew, but he wasn't like, obviously he wasn't Rocker and Leiter.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say for Vandy, Vandy gets to the national, the finals, the CWS finals, and Nick Maldonado's fingerprints are all over that, because if you remember the kind of arc of Vandy's season, Rocker and Leiter were money in the bank, and the rest of the pitching staff was, you never knew what you were going to get. Actually, if you felt like you knew one thing is, hey, if the guy threw good last game, he's probably going to blow up this game. It was just up and down, and they, you could see Tim Corbin and Scott Brown trying to find somebody to lean on besides those top two guys. And Nick Maldonado was really the guy that became someone they could count on at the end of the games. I know they considered starting him this year, but I think he's probably just too valuable at the end. But he's a real key to Vandy's season this year, because there's a ton of talent on that pitching staff, but boy, there are a lot of question marks.
Yeah. Second team, we've got another young man who's got a brother coming up on his heels. It's Kyle Teal from Virginia, with the shot heard around Charlottesville last year to get them into the College World Series. And then also obviously his brother Aiden is a reclassified senior. He was actually a 2023 grad initially, pushing up his last year of high school into this year, so that next year it'll be a two Teal Virginia next year. But Kyle is quite the player.
Quite the player. I mean, my teammate at D1 Baseball, Aaron Fitt, loves Kyle Teal. He wanted Kyle Teal on the first team, but we probably would have had to put him at DH, put him at DH and move Jacob Berry to third base, the kid from LSU. And so you just start getting into all these machinations. But, Kyle Teal is really an electric athlete, left-handed hitter. He really became Virginia's best hitter last year. His offense was a big reason why they get to Omaha. Scouts are mixed on him behind the plate. I would say that he's almost too athletic right now at catcher. Like he's so electric that it's just too much movement. But because he's so athletic, I think scouts do finally say, hey, if an athlete of his caliber can't figure it out back there, nobody can.
Yeah.
But nobody's confused about the bat. It's a top of the class bat. So be really interested, be exciting to see what he can do as the full-time catcher this year.
Yep. Now third team is one of South Jersey's finest, and one of our friends at on the main site, Noah Dean, Tiny Pinelands regional, but big, not many bigger arms in college baseball. In fact, you might say there aren't any.
Yeah.
And Noah hitting triple digits on occasion down at ODU.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about it. Like, and ODU has always done a great job recruiting New Jersey, right?
Oh my
Like they,
gosh.
yeah,
I
they
didn't
do.
realize until I started doing this.
Yeah, they do a heck of a job getting into Jersey. And you know, Noah Dean is, I mean, it's a left-handed arm that's going to touch 100. I mean, we have him 58th in our top 100 for the draft, just because you know the relievers do get to 10. They get pushed down the draft board sometimes, but I don't know. You know, it's a lefty throwing 100. There's not a lot of them walking around the planet Earth, so it's
I remember
yeah,
Billy Wagner, and then there was a
yeah.
Roldis. I don't know too many others.
Yeah, Noah Dean's a real key for Old Dominion though, because their whole offense is back. They're going to put up a lot of runs, but they did lose quite a bit of pitching, so they're really going to they're leaning on him. You know, they're going to need him to have a big year.
Yeah, and I know there was some control issues, but lefties tend to lefties aren't always as polished as righties at the beginning. When they figure it out, that's going to be, if he doesn't go until 58th, then whoever gets him at the end of that second round is getting a steal.
No doubt. I totally agree.
So it is Valentine's Day today when we air our initial episode. We hope you watch many times after Valentine's Day. But since you are, as far as we know, the person who loves college baseball more than anyone else, certainly at the D1 level, which makes you the person who loves your job more than anybody else in college baseball. What are three things that you love about the sport that is starting, Friday?
Yeah, I would say I like, my brain goes to three places on this. One is, you know, I think about the stories, I think about the relationships, and then I just love our postseason. And some of this stuff is going to have Jersey ties, you know, like this one not, but Virginia goes to Omaha last year, and their catcher Logan Michaels is just, you know, fifth year senior grinder guy. Like he's an exceptional kid, but there's nothing exceptional about his game except for you can just rely on him and trust him. And he hits his first home run and in Omaha, and his dad, who's a cancer, you know, has been battling cancer for 3 years, is in the stands. His dad's bawling, and you're like, I mean, come on, like what that type of moment. Hey, I think about, I'll tie it into NJIT. We mentioned Kevin Kopps earlier, and you know, Kevin Kopps going into last year, Kevin Kopps won the Heisman Trophy for college baseball last year, and what's crazy about that, it was his fifth year. You know, his first year he's a reliever, then he has Tommy John his second year, then his third year goes okay. It's like a 4 ERA. His fourth year of college, Kevin Kopps, had an 8 ERA, and he's asking the Arkansas coaches, hey, do you even want me back for my fifth year? And he's the national player of the year. So just stories like that. I think the other thing I think about, you know, these guys in college baseball, you know, from running the teams you're running, like 18 to 22 years old is such a cool age. And, you know, we had a reunion or an alumni day at Arizona State this weekend, and it's, you know, there's the famous guys, you know, like, I'm sure for Rutgers, it's like when they get together, it's like Todd Frazier, but for us, it's Dustin Pedroia and Andre Ethier there with their bazillion kids, but also four of their teammates from Arizona State whose names you would never know with their kids, and all their kids are growing up together because the bond is their college baseball experience. You know, so those relationships that these kids in college baseball are making, they're forever. They're going to be in each other's weddings. You know, their kids are gonna you know, run around the neighborhood together. And so, and then, you know, just like the postseason, it's just anything can happen. You know, we talked about NJIT. You know, everybody in the world is expecting Arkansas to beat them 20-0. And you wake up in the fourth inning and Arkansas is having an oh crap moment. Like, what in the heck is going on here? You know, I think about the Wright State, which is not a famous school unless you really follow college baseball, them giving Tennessee everything they wanted and more in that opening game. And so, yeah, I think, you know, I think about the Jack Lighters of the world, you know, he probably could have been a high pick, but maybe not a first round pick. He goes to Vanderbilt, and then he's the most coveted player in the draft. So yeah, it's all those stories. That's what gets me juiced up for, you know, kind of the start of the season. Is we don't know. This time last year, Kevin Kopps was just a dude with an 8 ERA. Today, he's the guy that won our Heisman Trophy. So who's that guy this year? That's what I'm fired up for.
Who's that guy? That's right. I guess I'll ask you one last one. Give me an underdog to make the World Series this year. Now that you've had some time to.
Underdog to make the World Series. I'm gonna give you Cal Poly. Cal Poly in the Big West. They have the best position player in the country, Brooks Lee, shortstop, switch hitter. His dad is the coach, Larry Lee. You know, great hitting instructor. Brooks is going to be a first round pick. And so they've not been to the tournament in a few years. They also have a really good arm who was on Team USA, Drew Thorpe. So yeah, the Big West teams always give people problems in the postseason. And here's the thing, also, you got to get in, and then you only got to win 5 games. You win 5 games, you're in Omaha. So who knew?
Crazy. Roons, thank you. Mike Rooney, our guest, always goes too fast, but catch him on ESPN, catch him on D1baseball.com, catch him on covering Pac-12 baseball, catch him at a college baseball game near you. There's nobody who enjoys it more. Thank you so much for coming on, and can't wait till Friday.
You got it all. Appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. That's our show today, TGIM, college baseball preview. We look forward to catching everyone next time.